One quiet evening at a rural truck stop, a black doctor and his teenage daughter stop to refuel on their way home. But their peaceful night takes a brutal turn when two white female officers arrive. What starts as condescending remarks quickly escalates into violent actions, but just when their lives hang in the balance, a pair of headlights cuts through the darkness. The moment his sister steps out of the car, those officers are about to regret choosing the wrong family to harass. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. It was just past 11 on a Thursday night when Dr. Marcus Washington pulled his midnight blue Range Rover into Pump 4 of the Crossroads truck stop off Route 17. The highway stretched empty in both directions, due emptith kind of emptiness that felt deliberate rather than coincidental. A light fog had settled over the landscape, wrapping the distant trees in ghostly shrouds and diffusing the harsh overhead lights into soft, uncertain halos. The neon "Open 24 Hours" sign flickered intermittently, casting sporadic red pulses across the wet asphalt like a warning. Marcus stepped out of the vehicle with a quiet exhale, his body stiff after a 14-hour shift in surgery. His green scrubs were partially hidden beneath a black quarter-zip pullover, but the hospital ID clipped to his waist was clearly visible, the words "Chief of Cardiology" printed beneath his stern photograph. His face was handsome but weathered, tired in the way that working fathers often were. Deep lines etched around his eyes, closely cropped salt and pepper hair, lips pressed into a contemplative frown. But his movements were precise, economical. This wasn't unusual. This was just Thursday. In the passenger seat, his 16-year-old daughter Zora sat with wireless headphones perched on her head, textbooks spread across her lap. She wore a crimson hoodie with her school's debate team logo and a thin gold chain with a small pendant her late mother's wedding ring, transformed into a necklace she never removed. Her inhaler lay on the dashboard like a silent guardian close, necessary, ready. Marcus tapped the window gently. "Going to pay inside and grab some coffee. 5 minutes, you good?" Zora looked up, dark eyes intelligent and slightly tired, and nodded. "I'm finishing calculus. Lock the doors." He smiled briefly and walked toward the store. Less than 40 feet away, a sheriff's department SUV sat idling near the air pump. Inside were two white female officers, Sergeant Rebecca Mercer, early 50s with steel gray hair pulled into a severe bun and cold blue eyes that seemed to calculate rather than observe, and Deputy Allison Keene, younger, with a perpetual smirk and restless fingers that drummed against her thigh like she was counting down to something only she could hear. Their eyes tracked Marcus from the moment his feet hit the pavement. "Well, look at that," Mercer muttered, adjusting her body camera until the red recording light blinked off. "Range Rover, custom wheels. You think that's actually his?" Keene snorted. "Please." "Probably borrowed from his boss." "Let's find out." They exited their vehicle with practiced casualness, not rushing, not even hurrying, just deliberate, like predators who knew their territory held no surprises. Marcus noticed them immediately. He straightened instinctively, shoulders squaring, one hand still holding his credit card. "Evening, officers," he said evenly, but his eyes remained cautious, assessing. "Is there a problem?" "You own this vehicle, sir?" Mercer asked, gaze sliding over everything except his face, his hands, his waist, the ID badge, then down to his shoes, which were still spattered with blood from an emergency surgery hours earlier. "Yes, ma'am. Purchased it last year. Registration and insurance are current," he replied, reaching slowly toward his back pocket for his wallet. His voice remained steady, respectful, but not deferential. Keene circled around the back of the SUV, pretending to examine the license plate. "We've had reports of a vehicle matching this description in connection with some." Incidents in Westlake County. Marcus handed over his license and registration. I can assure you, this vehicle has only been used for my commute to Riverside Memorial and taking my daughter to school. Neither officer looked at the documents. Mercer just held them loosely while staring directly at him. You work at Riverside? As what, exactly? I'm the chief of cardiology. Just finished a double bypass this evening. Interesting, she said, tilting her head. You don't really look like someone who drives a car like this or holds a position like that. Marcus inhaled slowly, then exhaled. He didn't respond immediately. He'd heard variations of this before. He knew precisely what it meant. Inside the car, Zora had removed her headphones. She was watching through the window now, body tense, hands gripping her calculus textbook so tightly her knuckles had paled. Something felt wrong. Her father's posture had changed. His gestures had become more controlled, his words more measured. She reached into her backpack, silently retrieved her phone. The screen illuminated her face in the darkness. She typed quickly. Dad's in trouble. 2 sheriff deputies. Crossroads truck stop. Routine 17. Come now. She sent it to one contact, Aunt Amara. Then she opened her camera app and began recording, angling the phone toward the windshield while keeping it partially hidden behind her textbook. Marcus hadn't seen her actions. His attention was fixed on Mercer, who had taken a step closer, close enough that he could smell the cigarette smoke clinging to her uniform. You got anything in that vehicle we should know about? She asked. My daughter, he said calmly. She's doing homework. 16 years old doing homework at midnight? Keene said skeptically. AP Calculus. She has a test tomorrow. Keene leaned toward the passenger window, rapping her knuckles against the glass sharply. Zora flinched but kept recording. 16, huh? She looks older. What's she really doing in there? Marcus felt his jaw tighten. She's studying, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't frighten her. Just then, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. The small red light on both officers' body cameras was off. No recording. No accountability. No witnesses except his daughter, whose phone was now partially visible in the reflection of the window. He inhaled sharply. The timing couldn't be worse. The truck stop was deserted. The lone cashier inside appeared to be dozing, and the 2 women in front of him shifted their stance slightly, like hunters adjusting their position before a strike. Mercer smiled, a cold expression that never reached her eyes. Well, well, she said softly, almost to herself. Looks like it's just us out here tonight. And Zora, sitting in the passenger seat, holding her breath, trying to keep her hands steady, kept recording. The camera captured everything. Her father's rigid posture, the officer's predatory circling, the empty parking lot stretching into darkness. And that's how it began, not with shouting, not with flashing lights, but with a smile that promised nothing good and a question that wasn't really a question at all. Marcus could feel it. Something had shifted, the kind of tension that doesn't just build, it coils, tightens like a viper preparing to strike. Officer Mercer had stopped pretending. Her smile was gone now, replaced with something harder, more determined. Officer Keene stood just behind her, hand resting casually on her holster, eyes gleaming with anticipation, like she'd been waiting all shift for this moment. I'd like my identification back now, Marcus said clearly, hands visible at his sides, voice level despite the adrenaline beginning to course through his system. There's no rush, Mercer replied. She stared at him for a long moment, then deliberately dropped his documents onto the wet pavement. Oops, clumsy me. You're getting smart with us, Doctor, Keene asked, stepping closer. That how they teach you to talk to law enforcement at that fancy hospital? I'm speaking to you professionally, he replied, bending down carefully to retrieve his license and registration, though his knees nearly locked from tension as he did. You stopped me without cause. I provided identification. I've cooperated fully. Keene took another step toward the vehicle. Maybe he's hiding something, Beck. You see how he keeps looking back at the car? I'm concerned about my daughter, Marcus said, standing straight again. She's 16. She has asthma. This situation is stressful for her. 16? Mercer said, eyes narrowing. 16 years old out this late. What kind of father keeps a teenager out at midnight? You sure she's even yours? Marcus's jaw clenched. Don't question my parenting. Inside the car, Zora's breathing had begun to change, quick, shallow gasps. She leaned forward slightly, one hand reaching for her inhaler while the other continued recording. The stress was triggering her asthma, but she fought to stay calm, to keep the camera steady. You want to play games? Keene said suddenly, circling around to the driver's side. Go ahead, call someone, see if we care. Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket, thumb hovering over his sister's contact. His hand was steady now, not from calm, but from focus. But before he could press dial, Mercer lunged forward. I don't think so. With a swift motion, she knocked the phone from his grasp. It clattered across the concrete, sliding beneath the SUV. You don't make calls when we're questioning you. That's my personal property, Marcus exclaimed, stepping forward instinctively. And then it happened. Mercer's hand shot out, grabbing his collar and shoving him back against the vehicle. Keene moved in from the other side, twisting his arm behind his back. Stop resisting, she barked, applying pressure until he gasped in pain. I'm not resisting. My daughter is watching. That little brat? Keene spat, jerking her head toward the passenger window. She's recording us. Look at her. Inside the SUV, Zora's breathing became more labored. Her chest tightened painfully, vision blurring at the edges. She fumbled for her inhaler, but her hands shook too violently to coordinate the motion. Dad, she wheezed, barely audible, eyes wide with panic. I can't breathe. Marcus shouted. She's having an asthma attack. She needs her inhaler now. Shut up, Mercer ordered, and with one brutal motion, she yanked open the passenger door, reached in, and slapped the phone from Zora's hands. No one gave you permission to record anything, young lady. Zora cried out a dry, strangled sound and doubled over, clutching at her chest, struggling for air. Marcus broke free from Keene's grip with a surge of desperate strength, lunging toward his daughter. He grabbed the inhaler from the dashboard and pressed it into Zora's trembling hands. Baby, use it now. 2 puffs, deep breaths. Keene grabbed him from behind, wrenching him backward. That's it. That's resisting arrest. You just earned yourself a night in county. You're hurting him. Zora managed to gasp between desperate inhalations from her medication. Oh, now the princess has something to say. Mercer sneered, leaning into the vehicle. You think your daddy's special. You think that fancy car and doctor badge means the rules don't apply. Marcus was shaking now, not from fear but from rage, from helplessness, from the burning injustice of watching his daughter struggle to breathe while being treated like criminals for simply existing in the wrong place, at the wrong time, in the wrong skin. The night split open before the sound even registered. Headlights sliced through the fog like laser beams, accompanied by the growl of a powerful engine pushed to its limits. A sleek black Tesla Model X skidded to a halt just yards from where Marcus stood pinned against his own vehicle. The headlights burned through the mist, illuminating the scene with stark, unforgiving clarity. Officer Mercer instinctively reached for her weapon. Keen stepped back, hand moving toward her taser, but they froze as the driver's door opened and a tall black woman in an impeccably tailored charcoal pantsuit emerged. She didn't rush, she didn't shout. She walked with the kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself, it simply commanded attention. Her heels clicked against the pavement with metronomic precision, each step deliberate, measured, inevitable. When she reached the edge of the light, she raised a leather credential wallet high with one hand. The gold federal shield inside caught the light like a beacon. "Special Agent Amara Washington, FBI Civil Rights Division," she said, voice low but carrying across the silent parking lot. "Remove your hands from my brother immediately." The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, electric. Even the distant hum of the highway seemed to fade away for a heartbeat. Mercer lowered her hands slowly. Keen glanced at her partner, uncertainty flickering across her face. "He was resisting," Mercer began, voice suddenly professional, detached. "No." Amara cut her off. "What he was doing was protecting his child. What you were doing was violating his civil rights in at least 7 different ways that I can identify from just the last 30 seconds. Keen found her voice. "We had reasonable suspicion." "You had nothing," Amara interrupted, her eyes locked on Keen like targeting systems. "You had no warrant, no probable cause, and now you've assaulted a prominent physician in front of his minor child in a location where you believed there would be no witnesses, but you were wrong." She turned, gestured toward the road, and as if summoned by her command, 2 unmarked federal vehicles rolled into the parking lot, lights flashing silently behind darkened windshields. Doors opened simultaneously, and 4 agents in tactical vests emerged, moving with coordinated efficiency. One of them, an older man with salt and pepper hair similar to Marcus's, approached Amara and nodded respectfully. "We received your alert. Tactical team is standing by. Officers Mercer and Keen," Amara said calmly, "are to be detained pending a federal civil rights investigation. Their weapons, badges, and electronic devices are to be secured as evidence." "What?" Mercer barked, spinning toward the federal agents. "This is outrageous. You can't just—" "I can and I am," Amara replied, her voice never rising. "Your body cameras are conveniently disabled, but my niece managed to capture the entire encounter. Additionally, this parking lot has satellite surveillance as part of a joint task force operation targeting interstate drug trafficking. Every word, every action, every violation has been recorded from multiple angles." The color drained from Keen's face. Mercer's expression hardened into stone. "This is bullshit," she hissed. "Man should have complied if he didn't want trouble." Amara didn't flinch. "That statement will be added to the record, Officer Mercer. I suggest you exercise your right to remain silent before you further incriminate yourself." While the officers were being secured and processed, paramedics emerged from one of the federal vehicles. A young woman with quick movements and gentle hands rushed toward Zora, who was still struggling to breathe despite the medication. "Oxygen saturation is low," she reported after a quick assessment. "Pulse elevated. We need to get her on supplemental oxygen and monitor for secondary complications." Marcus whispered hoarsely, his professional demeanor cracking slightly. "Please help her." Amara moved closer, placing a steady hand on her brother's shoulder. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of shared history, of childhood promises to always protect each other. "She'll be fine. You both will. I'm riding with you to the hospital." She helped him into the ambulance while the paramedics secured Zora on a stretcher. The girl's breathing had stabilized somewhat, but her face remained pale, eyes wide and haunted. Her hand found her father's, gripping tightly. Amara reached down, gently brushed a tear from her niece's cheek. "You did good, Z," she said softly. "You saved your dad tonight." Marcus looked at his sister as the ambulance doors closed. "How did you know?" "Zora texted me," Amara said, "and she recorded everything. Those officers thought they were invisible out here, but they forgot the most important rule of law enforcement." "What's that?" Marcus asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Someone is always watching," Amara replied, her eyes moving to the satellite dish barely visible on the truck stop's roof. And tonight, it wasn't just the eyes in the sky. It was a 16-year-old girl brave enough to act when adults with badges forgot their oath. From inside the ambulance, as the doors closed and the emergency lights began to pulse, Zora looked out the small window one last time. She saw Mercer and Keene being escorted to separate vehicles, their faces twisted with anger and disbelief. She saw her aunt standing tall in the swirling lights, phone to her ear, already setting forces in motion that would echo far beyond this deserted truck stop. The roads of Westlake County weren't quiet anymore, not tonight. And they wouldn't be quiet again for a long time. The federal courthouse in downtown Riverside was imposing by designal granite and marble, with columns that stretched toward the sky like silent sentinels. Inside courtroom 4B, however, the atmosphere was surprisingly intimate. The wood-paneled walls seemed to absorb sound rather than amplify it, creating a hushed, reverent space where even whispers carried weight. The morning light filtered through high windows, casting long rectangles of gold across the polished floor, illuminating dust motes that danced like miniature galaxies in the still air. Marcus sat in the front row, his posture perfect despite the lingering pain in his shoulder. He wore a charcoal suit with a deep blue tie, his surgical tie, the one he saved for the most difficult operations. His hands rested on his knees, steady now, though the faint tremor that had developed since that night occasionally betrayed him when he reached for his water glass. Beside him, Zora sat with her spine straight, chin lifted slightly. She wore a simple navy dress with a gold necklace, her mother's ring still hanging from the delicate chain. Her asthma had stabilized in the weeks since the incident, but she carried her inhaler in her hand rather than her purse now, a new habit born of trauma. She hadn't returned to debate team practice yet. Public speaking suddenly felt different when you'd been silenced so violently. But she'd started writing instead long, detailed accounts of that night and its aftermath, processing through words what she couldn't yet say aloud. Across the aisle, a diverse crowd filled the benches, doctors from Riverside Memorial in white coats, nurses with stethoscopes still around their necks, teachers from Zora's school, neighbors, community organizers, and most surprisingly a contingent of uniformed officers from neighboring counties, their expressions solemn, their presence a statement in itself. At the prosecution table, Amara sat with two junior attorneys, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, her suit impeccable. She wasn't officially trying the case that would be a conflict of interest, but as the supervising agent, she remained central to the proceedings. Her face betrayed nothing, but her eyes never left the defense table, where Mercer and Keene sat in civilian clothes, their expressions a mixture of defiance and disbelief. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and piercing eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they touched. "Court is now in session," she announced, her voice carrying without effort. "United States versus Mercer and Keene. Are the parties prepared to proceed?" The federal prosecutor stood. "Yes, Your Honor." The defense attorney, a man with an expensive suit and a permanent frown, nodded. "Defense is ready, Your Honor." The prosecution's case was methodical, devastating in its precision. They didn't rely on emotion. They didn't need to. They had evidence, Zora's video, enhanced and stabilized by FBI technicians. The satellite footage, clinical and unambiguous. The medical reports detailing Marcus's shoulder injury and Zora's severe asthma attack. The officer's disciplinary records previously sealed but now exposed, revealing a pattern of similar incidents, all involving minorities, all mysteriously resolved without consequences. When Marcus took the stand, he spoke with the measured clarity of someone accustomed to explaining complex procedures to frightened patients. "I wasn't afraid for myself," he said, eyes moving between the jury and his daughter. "I was afraid they wouldn't let me help my child breathe." Zora wasn't required to testify in persona. Prosecution had successfully argued that forcing a minor trauma victim to face her abusers would constitute additional harm, but her recorded deposition played on screens throughout the recorded persona. Courtroom. Her voice was steady, her recall precise. Officer Mercer said, "People like you don't belong in cars like that." Officer Keene said, "Daddy's money won't help you here." When I started recording, Officer Mercer said, "No one will believe you anyway." The defense tried to paint Marcus as aggressive, Zora as disrespectful. They suggested the officers feared for their safety, that Marcus's movement seemed threatening. But then came the technical expert, a slight woman with thick glasses, who explained how the officers' body cameras had been manually disabled, not malfunctioning, not accidentally turned off, but deliberately deactivated using a specific sequence of buttons that department policy explicitly prohibited. When the jury returned after just 4 hours of deliberation, the courtroom held its breath. The forewoman, a middle-aged black woman with kind eyes and a stern mouth, stood. "On the count of deprivation of rights under color of law, we find the defendants guilty. On the count of excessive force resulting in bodily injury, we find the defendants guilty. On the count of obstruction of justice through evidence tampering, we find the defendants guilty." Mercer's face hardened. Keene's crumpled. The judge's voice cut through the murmurs that rippled across the room. "This court finds that the defendants not only violated their oath but betrayed the very community they swore to protect. You are hereby sentenced to 7 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 5 years. Additionally, you are permanently barred from serving in any law enforcement capacity within the United States or its territories." Marcus didn't react visibly. Zora reached for his hand, squeezing it once, hard. Amara's shoulders relaxed slightly, the first sign of emotion she'd shown all day. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had grown, not in anger, but in solidarity. They didn't cheer when the Washington family emerged. They simply nodded, acknowledging a truth finally recognized. An elderly man approached Marcus, leaning heavily on a cane. "My grandson was stopped by Mercer 3 years ago," he said quietly. "They broke his arm. Nobody believed him. Thank you for making them see." Marcus looked at the man for a long moment. "It wasn't me," he finally said, placing his hand gently on Zora's shoulder. "It was her. She refused to look away." Amara joined them, handing Zora a small package wrapped in simple blue paper. "This came from the director's office," she said. "He thought you should have it." Zora unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a letter of commendation and a small silver pin shaped like a torch. Not a badge, not a symbol of authority, but of illumination, of bringing light to darkness. "What happens now?" Zora asked, looking between her father and aunt. Amara smiled slightly. "Now we keep working. One case doesn't change a system, but it creates a precedent, and precedents become patterns, and patterns become change." 6 months later, the Westlake County Sheriff's Department underwent a complete restructuring. A civilian oversight board was established, with Marcus as one of its founding members. Body camera footage became automatically uploaded to secure servers, inaccessible to the officers wearing them. A new training program was implemented, focusing on de-escalation and implicit bias recognition. Zora returned to school different, quieter in some ways, more outspoken in others. She abandoned her plans to become a doctor like her father. "I want to be a civil rights attorney," she told him one night. "Like Aunt Amara, but in courtrooms instead of field offices." Marcus didn't argue. He recognized the look in her eyes, the same determination he'd seen in the rearview mirror that night as she'd recorded everything, even while struggling to breathe. At Riverside Memorial, Marcus continued saving lives, but now he also saved time for community forums, for speaking to young doctors about recognizing and reporting abuse of power, for testifying before state legislative committees considering police reform bills. One evening, almost a year after that night at the truck stop, Zora found him sitting on the back deck of their home, staring at the sunset. She sat beside him, placing 2 mugs of tea on the table between them. "I had that dream again," she said quietly. "The one where I can't breathe and you can't reach me." Marcus nodded. "I still have it too." "Does it ever go away completely?" she asked. He considered this, watching as the sky transformed from blue to purple to deep crimson. "I don't think so," he finally said. "But it changes. It becomes less about what happened to us and more about what could happen to others if we stay silent." Zora sipped her tea, the steam fogging her glasses slightly. "Is that enough? Just not being silent?" Marcus looked at his daughter, no longer the frightened girl in the passenger seat, but a young woman who had faced injustice and refused to look away. "It's where everything begins," he said. "The rest is what we do with the voice we find." As darkness settled over their neighborhood, lights began to appear in windows, one by one, like stars emerging in the night sky. Not justice, perhaps not yet, but visibility. And from visibility comes accountability, and from accountability, eventually, change. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.